can even hear his hooves clipping against one another as he goes. And for any of you that ride horses, it would be a sound that you are familiar with. Well, like I said, it's an animal we don't often get to see, and what a great start to the morning it is then. You can see it certainly does have a playful spring in its step. Beautiful. It's charging us. You'll notice how when they are younger, their coat is a lot more furry, and they certainly take on a slightly different appearance to the adults whose coats are short, and therefore the black and white lines very clear and distinct. I can hear a woodpecker drumming gently, and there's a chance that you can hear it as well. I am going to keep an eye out for it, because they are an animal that we so often hear but seldom get to show you. But there will be opportunities, and I am going to try and spot this woodpecker as we follow the zebra along the road. This large being, which is us, that is now stopped quite close to it. But he will no doubt continue across the road. And this is fully grown. It's a Speak's hinged back tortoise, and it does have a slight hinge that it can almost fold its shell up ever so slightly to help conceal the fleshy parts of its body so that predators cannot very easily attack them. And we don't see many of them at this time of the year because it's very dry, and tortoises rely on moisture, and obviously because they cannot travel large distances very easily, they tend to really slow down into the winter and almost become dormant. And that's something to remember about tortoises. Ooh, I can hear the audio again. Oh no. Which thankfully it only crackles sporadically and not very often, but apologies if you do hear that crackling noise. As I was saying though, it's something important to note when viewing tortoises, regardless of where you are in the world. If it's a dry season, you shouldn't pick them up, because tortoises will often urinate as a defense mechanism, and by picking them up it would cause them to urinate, and they can often be expelling precious liquid that they would naturally still be able to use. And here we have some tracks. Well done, Andrew, and awesome to be able to show you the tracks of this tortoise coming across the road. You can see obviously a trail of legs on the left and the right, making a very clear track that can't really be confused with anything else out here, other than the other type of tortoise that we get, called a leopard tortoise. We're going to leave it to its own devices. We don't have a good view from here. And we are off to the hyena den sites. Now, to keep all of you updated, we haven't seen the hyenas at their den site for quite some time now, and that's for various reasons. There's been lots of other great sightings going on that have dragged us away from the hyena den. But also, we've just had a bit of bad luck, and whenever we go to the den site, there's nobody home. And that is normal. The adults will come to the den site daily, often twice daily or even more than that, to allow their cubs to suckle. But once they have fed the babies, they like to move off and get some peace and relaxation, because if they stay at the den site, the youngsters will pester them permanently, either for play or for food. Anyway, we're just a few moments away from the hyena den to try our luck again, and I feel that our luck has got a turn, because it's been quite some time now that we've had a view of them. For probably 2 months now, for the months of February and March, they've been using a specific den site that we would go to and enjoy great sightings of them. But like I said, just about a week ago they've moved, and that is normal. They do like to move their den sites from time to time. There's no set rule as to how often they'll change. But basically the build-up of excrements as well as parasites within a den over months will force them to move off to a den site that has not been utilized, and therefore Mother Nature's kind of naturally cleaned out the excrement. The decomposers would have come in and got rid of that, and the parasites naturally would have left, because there was no hosts from which to parasitize. And as you can see, we certainly are in luck. So there's 2 separate litters of cubs at this den, and we can see 3 different cubs, one which is slightly older, and the other 2 which are maybe a month younger. And they really are inquisitive and quite often come very close to us, but as the other vehicle that is in the sighting started up, they got a little bit of a fright, and it is normal for all the different animals to get the odd fright, and obviously we try and avoid it as much as possible, but there's only one way to start your car, and that's just what happened. And I'm sure they're going to come out and continue to play around shortly. And what we'll be able to do now that the other vehicle is leaving the sighting is be able to reposition and get a much better view. So that's great news for us. Shame, so
Your front mic is not working.
he was very apologetic for chasing the cubs away, but as you can see, they've already just poked their head back out again, and we're going to now reposition and enjoy some time with these interesting creatures. Well, you may hear some birds calling. Those are go-away birds. But they've just flown off, so we probably won't hear from them anytime shortly, unless there's one still sitting in a tree that I cannot see. And look at how cute this is. One of the cubs is peeking through a little gap between its mother's legs and just keeping an eye on us. There it is. They really are inquisitive and often come very close to the vehicle, and I think they may well do that shortly. So, those are the two smaller cubs from the most recent litter, and it was the slightly larger one that came out. And you'll notice, hopefully if we get them in the same shot, there we go, the slightly bigger one's coat is considerably different to that of the younger ones. They would have been born pitch black, and at around 3 months of age they start to change their coat coloration to a more spotted one. And this, the larger cub, has got a considerably more spotty coat than its younger cousins. And this one's now taken some time off to do some chewing practice. And being a hyena, they are an animal that has one of the strongest sets of jaws out here. And it's important for them to start training and practicing to use those jaws and building the huge muscles within their jaw bones, so that when they do become older and they do need to crunch through bone that no other animals can crunch through, they'll be ready for it. And even this other youngster here, you can see, is also looking for something to chew on. Go ahead. Here's the mother of the other two cubs, not the cub we're viewing now. And it's not very often that we see both adults back at the den sites at the same time, which we can therefore read into and assume that even though they're part of the same clan, they don't necessarily move around with one another in search of food. Now, they don't only scavenge hyena, they are also formidable hunters when they need to be. However, in this part of Africa, in the Sabi Sands, they rely a lot on stealing from leopard, and they can do that single-handedly. They don't need other hyena to help them. And because there is a high leopard density here, they've almost become specialists in this task. Whereas other areas of Africa, the clans of hyena will actively search for food and prey together in order to have strength in numbers. And obviously, if there's enough hyena around, they could even overthrow lions from a kill. Sadly, we're a bit too far away to get an update from them. Now we can see these two cubs playing around, and yes, it is playful, but already from a very young age they will be beginning to assert dominance over one another. And they'll do this because there's an intense hierarchical system within a clan of hyena, and siblings will compete to become the next king or queen of this clan. And therefore you can expect stronger competition and more aggressive fighting between siblings of the same sex. So males would fight more heavily with other males and females with other females. And it has been documented and noted that they'll even compete to the point of death, whether they outcompete one of their siblings when it comes to nursing, or whether they physically actually attack and kill one another. And yes, nature can be harsh, but it is a reality, and we can only speculate as to what happened to the sibling of the older cub. There's only one left, and this almost certainly would have been more born. So it'll be interesting to know what happened to that one's brother or sister. Now, what can be difficult is sexing hyena. They both have very similar looking appendages, and therefore it can be difficult to determine whether hyena are male or female, even when they're fully grown. Tumbled out of the tree. But they do rely on milk for much longer than lion or leopard. Lion and leopard of this age, probably around 3 months of age now. These 3 and 4 months of age would be my guess. 3 months for the younger ones and 4 months for the slightly older one. And again, that is just a rough guess on my behalf. But from that same age, lions and leopards will be beginning to substitute milk. And the hyena's diet of a lot of bone, which they can crunch through, and not only can they crunch through it with their incredibly powerful jaws, but their digestive system can also further break down those shards of bone, and they'll therefore be receiving a high calcium intake, which makes for very nutritious milk to raise their cubs with. And speaking of which, they are currently drinking on some of this rich in calcium, highly nutritious milk. And as you can see, there was the other cub that approached the den there, and the cub and the adult turned around and gave it one look, and then it ran off. And it's incredible how obedient young animals can be in nature. And I guess they've had a proper upbringing. You may be thinking of puppies or kittens that are a nightmare to deal with, and that's probably because they're being raised by us and we don't know how to do it properly, whereas these cubs certainly do seem to have a fairly large amount of discipline considering how small they are. Go ahead.